Founder of the Center for Values in Leadership and one of the leaders of the Labour Party, Professor Tomi, yesterday revealed that the crowdfunding portals Nigerians in the diaspora plan to launch for the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi, will be unveiled next week. However, some leading lawyers have expressed concerns about the legality of the decision of the presidential candidate of the Labour Party to inaugurate the Diaspora Committee to raise $150 million from Nigerians in the diaspora and 100 billion naira from his supporters in Nigeria. While some senior advocates of Nigeria argued that the law prohibits the Labour Party from retaining any contributions made for its election expenses from the diaspora, former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, NBA, Chief Joseph Daudu, did not foresee much constitutional logjam with the issue. Daudu observed that the only law that affects any donor or contributor is the one that limits the amount a candidate can raise for an election, in this case, which is the office of the president. Joining us now is Professor Paul Ananaba, a senior advocate of Nigeria and chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association section on public interest and development law. Good morning, Professor Ananaba. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Dr. Abati.
Good morning.
Good morning. I just heard the prologue you went through. Should I begin to comment on that?
Yes, please go ahead. That's the main issue. Is it legal to do crowdfunding and get funds from the diaspora by a presidential candidate?
Simply, the laws are very clear on this. The political party, Labour Party in this instance, or even any political party for that matter, can not raise funds from outside Nigeria. If they do, they cannot retain such funds. And it's a constitutional issue as much as a crime within the Electoral Act, Section 85. Now, let me take the constitutional part of it, Section 225, 2, 3, A and B. Yeah, it's very clear that the political party cannot raise funds outside Nigeria or retain funds or accept funds. If they do, they must, within 21 days, turn those funds over to INEC. And any contravention of that provision is a criminal offense. And I'm happy that we are now talking about election offenses commission and all that, so that these laws over time have been lying waste, that they've not been activated. That's why impunity in the electoral system has continued for some time. I think that irrespective of the good intentions or whatever people will have to support political parties in Nigeria, particularly Nigerians abroad, they cannot do that from abroad. They can only come into Nigeria and contribute. And when they do, the Electoral Act Section 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, and 90 deals with election financing. And the effect is that it's an offense under the Electoral Act to contribute more than 50 million naira. So, and if you are going to do that, INEC has to be notified. Now, maybe because Peter Obi is in the Labour Party, that's why a lot of attention is paid to it. Our laws does not say anything about the candidate. If you look at Section 152 of the Electoral Act, it does not define a political party to include its candidate in election. Now, if you also look at the definition of a candidate, the candidate does not include a political party. And that's why in election petitions and whether pre-election or the election petition itself, the political party and the candidate are sued separately. So the candidate is not caught up by this analysis I've made, these provisions of the Constitution, maybe going forward. So a candidate is not precluded from raising funds, but a political party is precluded. And if a political party raises funds, it must, within 21 days, report back to INEC, turn the funds over to INEC. It cannot retain the funds for more than 21 days. So I don't think that Labour Party has looked at that. If they have looked at that, they should practically warn themselves and move away from raising funds outside the country. Even when they're raising within Nigeria, they have limitations. They have to comply with the law. Everyone should be more law-abiding. No one should become too sentimental to avoid the clear provisions of the Constitution in this instance, and then the Electoral Act. Now, INEC has a duty to also regulate election expenses, and the political parties have duties to make returns to INEC as to how funds they raise, the expenses they make, and the Electoral Act is so clear that those funds must be accounted for. But, you know, those are in our law books. In practice, I've not seen that happen. INEC also has a duty to make returns as to its inspection and regulation of monitoring of finances of political parties to the National Assembly. I'm not sure that has been done, but in 2023, I think Nigerians will look forward to all these provisions of the Constitution and the Electoral Act being complied with. It's a no-no for any political party to go to raise funds from outside the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Well, thank you, Prof, which is, I imagine, why Section 86, which mandates political parties to submit annually their full statements of accounts to INEC, gives a provision for 6 months imprisonment for a political party official rather than individual candidates, just to buttress what you said. But I have two questions for you. I'll start off with Labour Party's position that this clamor arose from the diaspora, that there are individuals in the diaspora who wants to support the candidature of their presidential candidate, Peter Obi. So is there any legal way that that can be done, bearing in mind what we've just discussed? That's my first question. My second question is that there have been calls for disqualification of Peter Obi from the presidential elections, from the Tinubu-Shetima group, that support group has called for their disqualification. Are there grounds for disqualification at this time?
Well, I don't speak for INEC or for the courts. I don't also speak for the political group that are calling for disqualification. We're in a democracy. The call is not a problem. They can make calls for disqualification of any candidate, but speaking clearly, and analysis, I have stated clearly that Section 225A that came in from the fourth alteration and 225 itself of the Constitution does not talk about the candidates, so there's no basis to disqualify any candidate. It talks about the political party raising funds from outside the country. Like I said, the candidate is not barred in any way from raising funds from outside Nigeria, but the political party is. Okay? That's what the Constitution says, and that's what the Electoral Act says. No mention is made of the candidate. You can read Section 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, and 90. Now, where the regulations that are seen in respect of the candidate comes into how much they can spend for elections, how much the president cannot spend more than 5 billion, and all that. The governor cannot spend, governorship candidate cannot spend more than 2 billion. That's what the law says. We shouldn't go beyond the law. And talking about bringing in a disqualification on that ground for a candidate when the law does not say so, I don't think it is correct. If we are not satisfied with the law, we should do what is needful. Take steps to ensure that there's an amendment of the law. The Electoral Act is just still fresh. Section 152, like I stated, does not define a candidate to include a political party. And it does not define a political party to include its candidate. So that is the position of the law as we speak. So if a call can be made, but it won't go beyond that call because it is not backed up by law, in my opinion. The law is very clear. The party cannot, but the candidate is not precluded.
Okay, Prof, good to see you again. Good morning, sir. Let's talk about enforcement, because in all of this, when we look at it, enforcement has always been a big problem. And the fact that, yes, there are guidelines on how much people can spend, but obviously they will outspend it. So for good measure, on TV yesterday, I was watching a certain political party, not part of the big ones, having a meltdown. And one of their members did even confirm that for the party primaries alone, the person that finally emerged the candidate, the presidential candidate, the chairman of the party did ask him to give him 2 billion naira. And this is not part of the major parties. Before they finally negotiated to a certain amount, but he didn't say if that money was given or not. But the truth has to be told that even for party primaries, people have spent over 2 billion for, a party that's not a major party, let alone the major parties. We saw how much they spent during their party primaries. So how realistic is all that we have on ground? And how can we truly enforce all of this?
Well, incidentally, I have spent my academic life writing about enforcement of judgments and laws. So I understand the point you've taken. An unenforced law is as good as no law. And that's why in the course of my speech this morning, I was just saying that it is good news that we are having election of Offences Commission. Because think about it, INEC cannot have the capacity to enforce all these laws. What you see from Section 85 to Section 90, aside from other laws, INEC cannot have that capacity. At a particular point, the former INEC chairman, Professor Jega, has stated that he had over 790 election offenses, suspects. How much does the commission have that it will begin to prosecute all those people? And that's why after the threat that any people will be brought to book, if you offend the Electoral Act, you will be brought to book. No book is brought, and nobody is brought to any book. Now, the Election Offences Commission, I support, should be hastened and be put in place, and we'll have special prosecutors on that point. Then people will begin to know that there's a bindingness of that law. So enforcement is so important. That is the difference between some of the countries in this part of the world and other parts of the world. No Nigerian will do certain things we do in Nigeria, in the UK or in the US or even in South Africa or other countries, because of enforcement. They don't have better laws, but it is just enforcement and the impunity that comes from the fact that, I can escape it. You will have seen that in recent times, even a former deputy senate president, it has been difficult to even secure bail in the UK, despite our relationship with the UK. And so you see commentators saying that if this had happened in Nigeria, that matter would have been over. So we should begin to make sure that our laws are serious by ensuring enforcement. And that is a major agenda for anyone who wants to rule this country. I would expect, as a law enforcement, judgment enforcement minded lawyer, to say that, to tell Nigerians what what such person will do at the state level, at the local government, at the national level, to ensure that our laws are enforced, and not preferentially, not randomly, but in an organized and clear manner, that people now know that if you do anything wrong in this country, there's a consequence. There are sanctions which will surely come to pass.
Well, Prof, just a clarification. Will it be correct to infer that the presidential candidate of the Labour Party setting up a diaspora committee to do crowdfunding has not violated any law? Is that what you're saying categorically? Because as you said, Section 225...
As Labour Party, yes, 225 doesn't say, say anything about the candidate. I've made that point very clear. It doesn't say anything about any candidate. And I also, you have to read this in a communal and community way. You have to read it purposively. When you read 225 of the Constitution, both 225A that came from the Fourth Alteration and 225 itself, and then Section 85 of the Electoral Act, along with Section 152 of the Electoral Act, then you get a clear picture. Now, when you read 85, 86, 87 to 90, where a candidate is intended by the law, it says a presidential candidate shall not spend more than 50 million. It calls the candidate. Now, any presidential candidate, any candidate for whatever, is not precluded from raising funds from outside Nigeria by the law as it is today. But the political party sponsoring him cannot. So if Mr. P2B is raising it as Labour Party, that is an offense. That is not correct. That is wrong. But if he's as an individual, there may be other laws to talk about, but not the Electoral Act, not the Constitution. We may be talking about things, financial regulations, and things that go with terrorism financing and all that, and not to see whether there has been any infraction. But as far as the Constitution is concerned, on a candidate and not a party. A candidate is a candidate, the party is a party. The candidate is a person sponsored by the party and has an existence, a legal significance, a legal status separate from the party. So it may be necessary to amend the law if we intend the candidate to be bound by that law. That the law may have to be put in place for that purpose.
Thank you for that clarification, Prof. But is there a problem with the amount that the Labour Party presidential candidate wants to raise? We've heard $150 million. We have heard 100 billion naira.
One, that there is a problem. You cannot raise more than 50 million. You cannot contribute more than 50 million to a political party. That's what the Electoral Act says. You cannot contribute more than that. If you look at Section 87 of the Electoral Act, it's very clear. There is a fine for it. If you contravene it, there's 10 million naira fine and all that. So Section 87, it is INEC will regulate the amount of money you can get, you can raise. And in this instance, they cannot raise from outside the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That's the problem. First hurdle. Second hurdle is how much. You cannot raise more than 50 billion. So that amount, that is $150 million, goes way ahead, outside it. And the law enforcement must, stand firm on this before it becomes, other parties begin to join. It must be clearly stated to Labour Party that they cannot raise funds. Like I said, but the candidate is not directly affected by that.
Yeah, but even the candidate can't spend more than 5 billion under Section 88.
Exactly. He can't spend more than 5 billion, yes.
Right, the law is clear, but I'd like your take on the exclusion of Nigerians in the diaspora throughout the political process. Not only can they not vote on election day, there are these, problems with them donating to their preferred campaign fund. Would you like to see an amendment, sort of like what we had in Kenya, what we saw in Kenya, where 12 countries had Kenyans voting, countries like Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom, and what have you, with Kenyan residents that were able to participate in their electoral process?
I think that it is not fair to Nigerians in diaspora to exclude them from voting. Maybe it's a logistic point. I look forward to the 2027 election, that every effort should be made that every Nigerian should vote wherever they are. I don't want to get into the complicity of nationality, whether they've changed nationality or that. But once you are a Nigerian and you intend to vote, the ICT and technology has been far developed across the world, that we cannot say because you are not in Nigeria you cannot vote. And let me take that point again that you alluded to. The point of those in diaspora trying to fund or support political participation. Since they are Nigerians, they should be bringing their monies to Nigeria to support the economy. And by that, the funds they have in Nigeria, they can donate from their accounts in Nigeria. They don't need to donate money from outside Nigeria to infract the law. If they want to support a political party, they can do that from bringing their money into Nigeria and then support the political party they want to, and within the limits allowed by the law.
All right, so still talking about election financing and the likes and alternatives. There are some models being used in some parts of the world, and the Americans lead the way in terms of very innovative financing with things like Super PAC, where groups put themselves together, they raise their own money, independent of the political party, independent of the candidate, but they use that money to fund the candidates. Is there a possibility of that anytime soon in Nigeria?
Yeah, but the electoral laws of the Americans may not be the same with Nigerians. And I was just saying that Section 87 of the Electoral Act, Section 87(1) is very clear. It says that the INEC must regulate contribution. And if you go down to about 89, 88, 89, it states that you cannot donate to political parties more than 50 billion. So there are restrictions. You have your freedom to come together within Nigeria to support any political persuasion. But then it can't be more than 50 billion. If it is, the commission will have to carry out its duties to ensure that there is sanity. Otherwise, we will just be doing money politics.
But is that not what
there should be money, yes, but there should also be ideology.
But is that not what we are doing in Nigeria, Prof? Is it not money politics we are doing in Nigeria? And I'm pushing this even further by asking because
I'm not in a position to say so. But when you look at election observers and reports from elections, we hear that there is vote buying. Nobody has been convicted of that, to my knowledge now. So when we have convictions, we can then say authoritatively that money has dominated what we do. Yes.
Does INEC too also regulate, finances that might be used for the purposes of, take for instance, media exposure, banners and things like that, and popularity boosting events and things like that are organized independent of the political party, because that is also supposed to be part of the cost that makes up that 5 billion. But most of the time, how does INEC scrutinize it? So I'll take you to other climes. In climes like France, for instance, there's a stipulated measure of media exposure you can give to each candidate, which if you pass it will be violated. But how does INEC enforce things like that here?
We go back to enforcement. I do not think that these laws have been enforced as I said earlier, and it is overwhelming to leave one agency, one commission to do all this, and that's why I was saying that an election offences commission would be very helpful to this country, and that commission should be set up as at yesterday. It would now be the duty of that agency to regulate exposure, finances, how you spend, what you do. You will see that what you call money politics will be downplayed. If that agency comes up and works, they will now have the duty to scrutinize how much that comes in, how much you spend, and then we may then begin to go to ideologically based politics. You know, look at the Beavers machine that INEC deployed. Because of that, we are no longer talking about ballot stuffing now, carrying our ballot papers, shooting people, and all that. It's no longer there because technology are taking care of it. There's been a solution. So it is with this election financing. We need that election offences commission to come up quickly. It's not something you say. There is a police there. There are other security agencies. They may not be well cut out to address the sophistry of the politician. You know, that is the sophistry of politicians, and this commission should then be a step ahead of the politician. The police officer may not have that capacity. You know, we may not have that special training, and we can continue to complain every election round and write reports, and it will not change anything. So the better thing is to have a specialized agency. In France and all those places, they are regulated, highly regulated. And again, the level of patriotism in such countries may be very high. You know, they don't want their system to be polluted in any manner. Look at our country today. Do we have records of previous convictions of people? You know, do we have is our national ID actually functioning effectively, so that you now know that if you are convicted, you can be tracked easily. Many people have not been dragged into that net. So these are the issues, but we must begin to solve them from yesterday. You know, we should begin to put things in place. We have done well even as a country, but we need to do better than where we are.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Ananaba, for joining us on the morning show. Thank you very much indeed.